The question hit like a freight train, shattering the carefully calibrated atmosphere of the television studio before the broadcast had even hit the 3-minute mark. You know what is amazing about AOC? Donald Trump stood center stage in CBS Studio 57. It was 8 p.m. Eastern prime time. The room, designed to comfortably hold 300 polite observers, was currently packed with 400 people who were anything but polite. The air conditioning was fighting a losing battle against the body heat and the radiating tension. It was hot, stifling, and electric. The room was a visual representation of a fractured America. On the left side of the aisle, a sea of red MAGA hats, Gadsden flags draped over shoulders, and Trump 2024 banners held in laps. On the right, a block of younger, diverse faces wearing Green New Deal shirts and AOC merchandise. They glared across the aisle at each other like opposing armies, waiting for the horn to sound. Cameras were positioned in every corner, swooping on cranes, locking in on the faces of the combatants. 10 million Americans were watching at home on cable, but the real numbers were on social media. TikTok streams, YouTube Live, X Spaces, where the viewership was climbing into the tens of millions. Margaret Brennan sat at a sleek glass desk between Donald Trump and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She shuffled her index cards, tapping them on the table, trying to look like she had control of the situation. She didn't. She was a referee in a cage match where the fighters had already decided to ignore the bell. Trump leaned forward. He wasn't standing behind a podium. He was pacing the small circle of carpet assigned to him. He projected that distinct New York businessman energy, aggressive, direct, the kind of physical presence that fills a room whether you want it to or not. He looked at AOC, then at the camera, then back at AOC. "She shows up here," Trump boomed, his voice overriding Brennan's attempt to introduce the topic of inflation. "In a designer outfit that costs more than most people in Queens make in a month, and she wants to lecture me about helping the working class." He paused. He let the accusation hang in the dead air. 5 seconds. 10. The audience began to stir. A low murmur started on the MAGA side, a ripple of defensive whispers on the left. "That is rich," Trump said, a smirk playing on his lips. "Actually, no. She is rich. That is the point. Let's talk about that." AOC shifted in her seat. She remained composed, her posture perfect, her chin tilted slightly upward. It was the expression she wore when she debated committee members she considered her intellectual inferiors, the look that said, "I have dealt with worse than you, and I am the smartest person in this room." She reached for her microphone, ready to pivot to policy, ready to talk about systemic inequality. Trump didn't let her breathe. "Folks, what you are about to hear tonight is something special," Trump said, turning his back on her to address the camera directly, breaking the fourth wall. 5 rounds. We are going to do 5 rounds. 5 examples of the biggest hypocrite in the history of the United States Congress. And believe me, that is saying something. Margaret Brennan tried to interject, her voice rising an octave. "Mr. Trump, the topic for this segment is economic." Trump raised one hand. It wasn't rude exactly. It was the gesture of a man stopping traffic. "Not now, Margaret. We are talking about economics. We are talking about the economics of fraud." He looked back at the audience, scanning the faces in the crowd. "We are going to talk about her fancy parties," Trump listed, ticking them off on his fingers. "We are going to talk about her luxury lifestyle. We are going to talk about the jobs she killed, 25,000 of them. We are going to talk about the people she hurt. All of it. Everything. The studio audience leaned forward collectively. This was the friction point. This was what they had lined up for blocks to witness. It wasn't a debate about tax brackets or carbon credits. It was the confrontation everyone had been waiting for. It was Trump versus AOC. It was Queens versus Queens. It was the billionaire versus the socialist. It was reality versus fantasy. Mr. Trump, Brennan tried again, if we could just stick to the format. The format is the truth, Trump snapped, though he was smiling. And the truth is, we have a disaster on our hands. A disaster named Alexandria. He walked closer to her, invading her personal space just enough to make the optics jarring. You want to talk about helping the poor? Trump asked her. Great. I love that. Let's talk about the dress. The famous dress. The $35,000 dress. The one you wore while working people in your district couldn't afford groceries. AOC rolled her eyes, a practiced gesture of dismissal. That has been debunked, Donald. It was a borrowed garment for a cultural institutions. Debunked? Trump laughed, a harsh, barking sound. We are going to see who is debunked. Because I brought receipts. I always bring receipts. He turned to the camera, his eyes narrowing. If you have been waiting for someone to finally call out AOC for her hypocrisy, Trump said, pointing a finger through the lens, hit that like button right now. Share this stream. Trust me, you are going to want your friends to see this. Because what I am about to show you, nobody has ever seen anything like it. Nobody. He stepped back, adjusting his tie, looking relaxed, looking dangerous. We are going to start with round one, Trump declared, and we are going to start with a woman named Maria and Alexandria. You are going to want to hear what Maria has to say. The room went silent. The tension was no longer just political. It was personal. The show had begun. Donald Trump didn't believe in slow builds. He didn't believe in warming up the crowd. He operated on the principle of the blitzkrieg, overwhelming force at the point of attack. So, picture this, Trump said, gesturing broadly with both hands, painting the scene for the millions watching at home. And this is real, folks. You cannot make this up. The Met Gala. You know what that is? It is a fancy party. A very fancy party in New York for rich people. It is a party where the elites go to celebrate being rich. He looked at the AOC supporters in the audience, daring them to disagree. Tickets cost $35,000, Trump said. Per person, $35,000. That is more than a lot of people in this country make in a year. That is a salary. That is a life. AOC's jaw tightened. It was subtle, a flexing of the muscle near her ear, but Trump saw it. The cameras zoomed in, catching the micro-expression. And AOC shows up, Trump continued, his voice dripping with theatrical disbelief. She shows up wearing a dress, a custom-made, beautiful dress. Actually, I will give her that. It was a nice dress, but it says, "Tax the rich" on the back, in big red letters. Tax the rich, Trump drawled, drawing out the vowels. At a party full of rich people who paid $35,000 to be there, including her. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife. A nervous laugh bubbled up from the back of the room. Then another. It spread through the center section. Actually, Trump corrected himself, his timing impeccable. You would need one of those fancy knives they use at the Met Gala. Regular knives aren't good enough for the socialist socialite. The nickname landed with a thud. The socialist socialite. It stuck immediately. You could see people in the audience mouthing it, testing the weight of it. AOC's hands moved from resting casually on the armrests to gripping them. Her knuckles were turning white. She leaned into her microphone. Mr. Trump, Focusing on clothing while the planet burns is exactly the kind of superficial. I am not talking about clothes, Trump cut her off. I am talking about money. I am talking about who paid for the ticket. He started pacing again, the energy building. Let me tell you something, he said, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. While AOC was at that party, wearing that dress, drinking champagne with celebrities and millionaires and billionaires, there were people watching. Regular people, working people, people who had sent her money, believing she would fight for them. He stopped pacing and turned to face the audience, scanning the crowd row by row. How many people here donated to AOC's campaign? Trump asked. Raise your hands. Come on. Do not be shy. Raise them high. The room hesitated. Then, slowly, hands started going up. 1, 2, 5, 10, 20. More scattered throughout the back. About 40 hands in total. These were the true believers, the people who had bought the dream. Trump pointed at them, one by one, making sure the cameras followed his finger. These people, Trump said. Your people, AOC. The ones you claim to represent. They sent you money. Small donations. $50, $100. Whatever they could afford from their paychecks, from their savings. Money they needed for rent, for groceries, for their kids. He turned back to her. And you took it, Trump said. You cashed those checks. And then you went to the Met Gala. The hands in the audience stayed up. 40 people. 40 faces. 40 donors watching her. AOC couldn't look at them. Her eyes were cast down, staring at her notes as if they held the secrets of the universe. Let me tell you about one of them, Trump said. His voice changed instantly. The aggression vanished, replaced by a softer, more personal tone. Her name is Maria. Just Maria. One donor out of thousands. But her story? It is everyone's story. Trump did something that broke every rule of the broadcast. He walked off the stage. He walked down the steps and into the audience. Security tensed, but nobody stopped him. He stopped next to an elderly woman in row 8. She was small, thin, wearing a simple floral dress that had seen better days. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, clutching a worn purse. Maria sent AOC $50, Trump said, standing right next to her. $50. Maria is 68 years old. She worked her whole life as a waitress in Queens. Your district, Alexandria. The camera was tight on Maria's face now. Every wrinkle, every line of hardship was visible in high definition. Maria lives on Social Security now, Trump explained, $2,200 a month. After rent, she has $2,800 in expenses. She has $400 left for everything, food, medicine, bills, $400. That is it. That is all she has got after 40 years of work. The studio had gone completely silent. Even the camera crew seemed to have stopped breathing. The juxtaposition was jarring. The billionaire standing next to the waitress, defending her against the socialist. So, when Maria sent you $50, Trump said, looking back at the stage, it wasn't just $50. It was groceries for a week. It was medicine she needed. It was the difference between paying the electric bill on time or paying late fees. $50 was everything to Maria. Trump put a hand on Maria's shoulder. It was gentle, respectful. Maria's daughter was having a birthday, Trump said. Her 6th birthday. Maria wanted to buy her granddaughter a present, a doll, the one she had been asking for. It cost $35 at Target. Maria looked up at Trump, her eyes glistening. She wasn't crying yet, but she was close. But Maria believed in you, AOC, Trump said. She believed you would fight for people like her. So Maria didn't buy the doll. She sent the $50 to the fight. Maria nodded. 2 months later, Trump said, his voice hardening, Maria turned on the TV. She saw you walk into the Met Gala. She saw that dress. She saw you partying with the exact people you claim to oppose. Trump looked at AOC. She still wouldn't meet his eyes. And you know what Maria did? Trump asked. She called her daughter, and she explained why there was no birthday present that year. Why Grandma couldn't afford the doll. Because Grandma had sent her money to someone she believed in, Trump said. Someone who promised to fight for working people. Someone who was too busy partying with billionaires to remember where the money came from. The studio erupted. It wasn't applause. It was rage. Pure, unfiltered rage. Booing started in the back and rolled forward like thunder. The 40 donors with their hands raised were now shouting, "Where is our money? Give it back." Fraud! AOC's hands went to her throat. It was an unconscious gesture, protective. Her breathing had changed, shallow, quick. You could see her chest rising and falling against the fabric of her blazer. Panic breathing. Trump let it build. He let the anger spread. He let 400 people process the same betrayal at the same time. When he finally spoke, his voice cut through the chaos like a knife through butter. $35,000 for the ticket, Trump said. $35,000 for the dress. $70,000 total. For one night. While Maria's granddaughter got nothing for her birthday. He walked back to center stage and stood between AOC and the cameras. And that, Trump said, is just round one. The studio was vibrating with a specific kind of silence. The heavy, suffocating silence that follows a revelation so damning it sucks the oxygen out of the room. Donald Trump stood in the audience, his hand resting gently on Maria's shoulder. The camera remained tight on her face, capturing the map of every year she had worked, every dollar she had saved, and every hope she had lost. AOC sat frozen on the stage. Her usual rapid-fire defense mechanisms, the snappy retorts, the academic pivots, the Twitter-ready clapbacks, had abandoned her. She looked at Maria, then quickly looked away, staring at the floor as if she could burn a hole through it and escape. "Maria," Trump said softly, leaning down, "you have the floor. The Congresswoman is right there. Tell her what you told me." Maria stood up slowly. She used the seat in front of her for balance, her knuckles gripping the fabric. She was trembling, not from fear, but from the overwhelming rush of adrenaline that comes when the voiceless are finally handed a microphone. When she spoke, her voice was small and thick with emotion, but in the dead silence of the studio, it sounded like a shout. "I trusted you," she said. 3 words. That was all. But they carried the weight of a verdict. "I watched your videos," Maria continued, her voice gaining a little strength. "I saw you talking about people like me, about how the system was rigged, about how we were forgotten. I believed you. I thought you were one of us." She paused to wipe a tear from her cheek with the back of her hand. "I sent you that money because I thought you would use it to help us," Maria said, her voice cracking. "I didn't send it so you could go to a party with movie stars. I didn't send it so you could wear a dress that cost more than my car." "I am ashamed," Maria whispered, looking directly at AOC. "I am ashamed that I believed you. And I am ashamed that I took from my granddaughter to give to you." She sat down hard, burying her face in her hands. The woman next to her wrapped an arm around her, glaring at the stage with pure venom. The studio didn't erupt into anger immediately. It collapsed into grief. The realization swept through the room that this wasn't just politics. It was theft. It was the theft of faith. Trump stood there for a moment, letting the grief settle, letting the cameras record the devastation. Then he turned and walked back to the stage. His movement broke the spell. The grief turned into fury. "She trusted you," Trump said, his voice low and dangerous as he climbed the steps. "And you played her for a fool." He stopped at his podium, but he didn't go behind it. He stood front and center, blocking AOC's view of the audience, forcing her to look at him. "Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez," Trump announced, using her full name like a judge reading a sentence. "Under these lights, in front of these cameras, in front of Maria, and in front of 10 million Americans, I have a simple question. Did you or did you not attend the Met Gala while working families in your district struggled to pay rent?" AOC's voice, when it finally emerged, was unrecognizable. It was thin, high-pitched, and stripped of all confidence. The tickets were donated," she stammered. "It was for the Costume Institute. It is a cultural institution in New York. I was there as an elected official to—" "Yes or no?" Trump barked. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. 15. "Yes," she whispered. "Did your dress cost more than most people in Queens make in a month?" Trump pressed. "I didn't pay for the dress," she deflected. "It was loaned by the designer as a statement of yes or no." "Yes," she admitted, closing her eyes. "Did you use campaign donations, money from people like Maria, to fund your political operation while you were spending $70,000 worth of resources on one night of partying?" Her lawyer would have told her to stop talking. Her press secretary would have pulled the fire alarm. But she was alone on that stage, trapped in the glare of the lights and the stare of the man who had cornered her. "Yes," she said. Trump turned to the cameras, spreading his arms wide. "That is one scandal, folks," he declared. "One example of the socialist socialite taking your money to party with the rich while you can't afford groceries. She admits it. She can't deny it. The receipts are right there in the audience, crying in row 8. He walked back to his podium and opened a folder. It was thick. "But wait," Trump said, a dark smile returning to his face. "There is more. Oh, there is so much more." That was just the dress. Now, let's talk about the lifestyle. Let's talk about what she drives. Let's talk about where she lives. Let's talk about how she spends your money while lecturing you about greed. AOC's hands were shaking visibly now. She reached for her water glass, but her hand trembled so badly she had to put it back down without drinking. The cameras caught it all. The panic, the fear, the total collapse of the persona. "That is round 1, Trump said. "Round 2 is about to begin. And trust me, you are going to want to see this." Donald Trump was pacing again, feeding off the energy in the room. The audience was no longer divided. Even the people wearing AOC shirts were looking at the stage with skepticism, their arms uncrossed, their enthusiasm drained. The MAGA side was ecstatic, but disciplined, waiting for the next blow. "Let me tell you something," Trump said, his voice filling the studio. "I know rich people. I am a rich person. I know how they live. I know what they drive. I know where they shop." He stopped and pointed at AOC. "And let me tell you, she lives better than half the people I know at the country club." He turned to the audience. "Let me tell you about the people in AOC's district," Trump said. "The people she claims to represent. The Bronx, Queens, hard-working people, tough people. They drive 15-year-old Hondas. They drive Toyotas with rust on the doors. Their AC doesn't work, but they drive them anyway because they have to get to their second job." He looked at AOC. "You know what she drives?" AOC stared straight ahead, refusing to engage. She drives a Tesla, Trump announced. A Model 3, long range, about $50,000. A murmur went through the crowd. A Tesla wasn't a Rolls-Royce, but in a district where the median income was $30,000, it was a spaceship. Electric car, Trump mocked. Very progressive, very environmentally friendly, very expensive. You know what is amazing in the real world? Trump asked. The one where actual working people live? $50,000 is 2 years of salary. 2 years. People work 2 full years to earn what you spent on a car. He walked over to the edge of the stage. How many people here drive a car worth more than $10,000? Trump asked the audience. Raise your hands. Be honest. A few hands went up. Maybe 10 out of 400. See that? Trump said, pointing to the lack of hands. Those are the people you represent. The 98% who drive beaters. And you are in the 2% driving a luxury electric vehicle, telling them that capitalism is the problem. He spun back to her, quick and aggressive. Now, let me ask you something. How much did your Tesla cost? I needed reliable transportation for the commute to D.C., she said, her voice thin. It was a practical choice for the environment. How much? Trump demanded. Around $50,000, she murmured. And the people in your district, Trump asked, the ones who voted for you? What do they drive? This is a false equivalence, she tried to argue, slipping back into academic jargon. Transportation needs vary based on infrastructure and… No, Trump cut her off. This is called reality. You preach socialism. You tell working people they should vote to redistribute wealth. You tell them to take from the rich. You tell them equality is the only goal. And you drive a car worth more than they make in 2 years. Unless it is your Tesla, Trump grinned. Then it is fine. Then it is practical. The audience laughed. It was a bitter laugh, the sound of people realizing they were the punchline. And it isn't just the car, Trump said, relentless. It is the apartment, Navy Yard, Washington, D.C., luxury building, rooftop pool, concierge, gym, Whole Foods downstairs. $20,600 a month, Trump said, for a 1-bedroom. You know what working families in Queens pay? Trump asked. They pay that much for a basement with no windows. They pay that much for a walk-up with broken heat. But they pay it to survive, Trump said. You pay it to live in luxury, while telling them that landlords are the enemy. AOC's face was pale, glistening with sweat. I deserve a safe place to live, she snapped, her voice cracking. I work hard. I am allowed to have a decent apartment. Of course you are, Trump roared back, throwing his hands in the air. You deserve success. You worked hard. You made it. Under capitalism, Trump pointed at her with both hands. That is the point, Alexandria. You succeeded under the system you want to destroy. You are enjoying the fruits of the free market while trying to burn down the orchard. She wants socialism for you, Trump declared, but she wants capitalism for her. She wants to take your wealth and redistribute it. But her wealth? Her Tesla? Her luxury apartment? That is different. She earned that. She is the socialist socialite, Trump branded her, the queen of hypocrisy. The difference between you and them, Trump said, dropping his voice to a harsh whisper, is that they are honest. They know they are struggling. They know the system is hard, but they try anyway. They don't blame everyone else, and they sure as hell don't pretend to be something they aren't. He leaned in close. You got elected pretending to be Sandy from the Bronx, the bartender, the working-class hero, and the second you got power, you became exactly what you claim to oppose. Rich, entitled, out of touch. Unless you are AOC, Trump said. unless you are a fraud who never actually believed any of it. You just used it to get elected, to get famous, to get rich. While the people who believed in you, Trump gestured to Maria in the audience, got nothing. The studio was on its feet. 300 people were standing, applauding, roaring. The sound was physical, a wall of noise hitting the stage. AOC sat there, shrinking into her chair, looking smaller than she ever had in her life. "That is 2 rounds," Trump shouted over the noise. "The Met Gala, the Tesla, the luxury apartment. Socialism for you, capitalism for her." He walked back to his podium and opened the 3rd folder. "But folks," Trump said, looking at the camera with deadly seriousness, "the dress, the car, that is just money. That is just greed. Round 3 is different. Round 3 is about destruction. We are about to talk about the jobs she killed, the families she ruined, the 25,000 opportunities she lit on fire because she needed Twitter likes. If you thought the dress was bad," Trump warned, "wait until you see the Amazon deal." Round 3, coming up. The applause from the lifestyle segment died down, but the energy in the room didn't settle. It curdled. It transformed from the mockery of a $35,000 dress into something harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Donald Trump stood at the edge of the stage, his silhouette framed by the studio lights. He wasn't smiling anymore. The New York billionaire persona, the one who laughs at Tesla prices and luxury apartments, was gone. In its place was the builder. The man who looked at a skyline and saw steel, concrete, and payrolls. "We had a few laughs about the car," Trump said, his voice low and rumbling. "We laughed about the dress because, honestly, it is ridiculous. It is a joke." He walked back to his podium and slammed a thick binder onto the lectern. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "But this," Trump said, pointing at the binder, "this is not a joke. This is the tragedy." "Round 3, Trump announced. "Let's talk about the Amazon deal." AOC flinched. If the Met Gala was her vanity, the Amazon deal was her ideology. It was the moment she became a national icon for the far left, the dragon slayer who kept Jeff Bezos out of Queens. She had framed it as a victory for the working class. Trump was about to frame it as a massacre. "Let me tell you about the dumbest thing I have ever seen in the history of politics," Trump said. "And believe me, folks, I have seen a lot of dumb things. But this takes the cake." "Amazon wanted to come to New York," Trump narrated, his hands shaping the air. "To Queens, to your district, Alexandria. They wanted to build a headquarters. They wanted to invest billions of dollars. And they wanted to create jobs." Trump paused. He held up a single finger. 25,000 jobs. He let the number hang in the air, dense and suffocating. Not 2,500, 25,000. Jobs paying an average of $150,000 a year, Trump said. Tech jobs, management jobs, operations jobs, union construction jobs to build the tower, service jobs to feed the workers. It was the biggest economic gift in the history of New York. "And you," Trump said, turning slowly to face her. "You killed it. You celebrated. You threw a party on Twitter. You acted like you had saved the city from a monster. But you know what you really did?" Trump turned to the audience. "She burned down the future. She decided that 25,000 families didn't deserve a paycheck because she didn't like the CEO." Trump walked down the steps into the audience again. He moved toward a section of men and women who looked tired. People in work boots. People in button-downs that were frayed at the collar. "How many people here applied for one of those jobs?" Trump asked. or knew someone who did, or owns a small business that would have served those workers. Stand up. Slowly, silently, they stood. First, a man in a gray suit, then a woman in a union jacket, then a young man in a hoodie, then a middle-aged couple holding hands. 10, 20, 40, 60 people. They stood in the studio lights, a silent army of the lost. Trump stood among them. He put a hand on the shoulder of the man in the gray suit. "What is your name?" Trump asked. "Mike," the man said. His voice was steady, but his eyes were angry. "What do you do, Mike?" "I work in IT," Mike said. "I applied for a systems manager role at HQ2. It would have doubled my salary. I was going to buy a house in Astoria, get my kids out of the rental." "And what happened?" Trump asked. "The job vanished," Mike said, "because she said we didn't want it." Trump nodded. He moved to the woman in the union jacket. "And you?" "I'm with Local 3, she said. Electrical. That job site was 5 years of guaranteed work for my crew. 5 years of pension credits. 5 years of health care. And now? Now we're chasing scraps," she spat, looking at AOC, "because she thinks she knows better than us." Trump turned back to the stage. AOC was staring at her papers, her face ashen. The victory she had claimed for years was standing in front of her, staring her down with human eyes. 25,000 families, Alexandria," Trump roared. "That is a stadium full of people. You denied them a living. You denied them a future. You denied them dignity." "And for what?" Trump asked. "For clout? For an applause line at a DSA meeting?" "You have never created a job in your life," Trump said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You have never signed the front of a paycheck. You have never risked a dollar. You have never stayed up at night wondering how to make payroll. But you think you have the right to destroy 25,000 jobs because it fits your ideology?" The crowd began to murmur. The anger was visceral. It wasn't political. It was economic survival. Someone in the back shouted, "Where are the jobs?" It started as one voice. Then another joined in. Then the union workers. Then the small business owners. "Where are the jobs?" The chant grew louder, shaking the walls of Studio 57. It wasn't a rehearsed rally chant. It was a demand. It was an indictment. AOC put her hand to her earpiece, trying to block out the sound. She looked small. She looked overwhelmed. The theory of socialism was colliding with the reality of unemployment. Trump stood in the center of the storm, letting it rage. He watched AOC shrink. He watched the tears of frustration well up in her eyes. When the chant finally subsided, Trump walked back to the stage. He leaned over the podium, his face inches from hers. "You know what the worst part is?" Trump whispered into the microphone. "Those jobs didn't disappear. They just went somewhere else. They went to Virginia. They went to Tennessee. They went to places that want to work." "You didn't hurt Amazon," Trump said. "Jeff Bezos is fine. He is on a yacht right now." "You hurt Mike," he pointed to the audience. "You hurt the union workers. You hurt Queens." "You are a job killer," Trump declared. "And that is a sin you can't tweet your way out of." "That is round 3, Trump said, closing the binder. "The Amazon massacre." "But jobs are economics," Trump said, shifting his tone. "Round 4? Round 4 is about family. It is about abuela. And folks, this one is going to make you sick." The chant, "Where are the jobs?" still echoed in the rafters of the studio as Donald Trump opened the 4th folder. The atmosphere had shifted from anger to disgust. The audience had seen the economic cost of AOC's ideology. Now, they were about to see the moral cost. Trump looked at the camera, his expression grim. You know, he said, I have seen politicians use a lot of things for votes. I have seen them use flags. I have seen them use babies. I have seen them use war. But I have never seen a politician use their own grandmother as a prop for a fundraiser, and then leave her in the mud. AOC's head snapped up. Her eyes were wide, panic flashing behind them. She knew exactly what was coming. This was the skeleton in the closet she thought was buried under years of news cycles. Let's talk about Puerto Rico, Trump said. Let's talk about Hurricane Maria. Let's talk about Abuela. He pulled out a large placard and set it on an easel next to him. It showed a tweet from AOC. It was a photo of a dilapidated house in Puerto Rico. The roof caved in, water damage on the walls. The caption read, "Just went to visit my abuela. She is living in squalor. The Trump administration has failed Puerto Rico." Sad picture, right? Trump said. Heartbreaking. A congresswoman's grandmother, living in ruins. So, what happened? Trump asked. She posted this. She cried on Twitter, and the money poured in. She raised over $100,000, Trump said. From you. From well-meaning liberals who saw a grandma in trouble and wanted to help. $104,000 in a matter of hours. Trump paused. He flipped the placard over. The second photo was different. It showed the same house, but from a wider angle. The roof was patched. The walls were painted. It looked old, but it looked solid. It looked nothing like the ruins described in the tweet. This photo, Trump said, tapping it, was taken by a local journalist a week later. The house wasn't destroyed. The grandmother wasn't homeless. She was fine. She had been fine. But that isn't even the worst part, Trump said. He turned to AOC. You raised $100,000, Trump said. Supposedly to save your abuela. Where did the money go? AOC stammered. The family decided that the community needs were greater, and we distributed the aid to various Puerto Rican advocacy groups to— Name one, Trump snapped. Silence. You raised money on your grandmother's face, Trump said. You told the world she was suffering. And when the check cleared, you ghosted her. You didn't fix the roof, Trump said, because the roof didn't need fixing. You didn't save Abuela, because Abuela was a prop. It was a scam, Trump said flatly. It was emotional fraud. Trump turned to the audience. He looked for a specific group of people he had spotted earlier, people holding the Puerto Rican flag. We have some folks from the island here tonight, Trump said. Stand up if you or your family were affected by Hurricane Maria. About 20 people stood up. They looked solemn. They looked proud. Did any of you get a check from AOC? Trump asked. Heads shook. No. Nothing. Did you see any of that $100,000 help your neighborhoods? No. One woman stood tall, her voice shaking with rage. My mother lost her house, she shouted. It was actually destroyed. We got nothing. She used us. She used our pain for her likes. The accusation hit the stage like a physical blow. She used our pain. You hear that? Trump asked AOC, stepping aside so she had to look at the woman. That is the reality. You exploited a tragedy, Trump said. You exploited your own flesh and blood. You took the suffering of the Puerto Rican people, and you turned it into a GoFundMe for your political brand. That is low, Trump said, shaking his head. Even for Washington. That is the bottom of the barrel. AOC was crying now. Not the performative tears of a speech, but real, ugly tears of humiliation. She was shaking her head, whispering, No, no, but she had no defense. The money trail was opaque. The photos were undeniable. The victims were standing right there. You know what a real leader does? Trump asked. A real leader goes down there and hands out supplies. A real leader writes a personal check. A real leader doesn't post a selfie of a tragedy and ask for donations. You aren't a leader, Trump said. You are an influencer. And influencers do anything for engagement, even if it means selling out grandma. The audience groaned in disgust. The socialist socialite label from earlier was morphing into something worse: the fraud. That is round 4, Trump said, turning the placard around so the photo of the ruined house faced the wall. The grandmother grift. We have 1 round left, Trump said, and this is the big one. We have talked about the dress, the car, the jobs, the grandmother. Now, Trump said, opening the final thickest folder, we are going to talk about the fantasy. We are going to talk about the $93 trillion lie that she wants to force on every single one of you. Get ready, Trump warned, because round 5 is the Green New Deal. The chanting had stopped, but the vibration in the room remained. The audience, now fully awakened to the reality of the political theater they were witnessing, sat in a state of high alert. Donald Trump stood at his podium, but he wasn't looking at his notes. He was looking at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez with a mixture of amusement and pity, like a professor watching a student fail an exam they hadn't studied for. We have had some fun tonight, Trump said, his voice echoing in the silent studio. We talked about the dress. We talked about the car. We talked about the lies. He paused, his expression hardening into stone. But now, Trump said, we have to talk about the danger. Round 5, Trump announced. Let's talk about the Green New Deal. AOC straightened in her chair. This was her magnum opus, her legislative baby. She prepared to launch into her standard speech about existential threats, planetary survival, and the moral obligation of a generation. She opened her mouth to speak, but Trump held up a hand. Hold on, Alexandria, he said. Before you give us the speech about the end of the world, let's talk about the bill. Let's talk about the price tag. $93 trillion. He said it slowly, enunciating every syllable. 93 trillion. That is with a T, folks. That is more money than exists in the entire global economy. That is more than the GDP of every nation on Earth combined. That is not a budget. That is a bankruptcy filing for the United States of America. But it isn't just the money, Trump said, walking around the podium. It is what she wants to do with the money. He picked up a stack of papers, printed copies of the original Green New Deal FAQ document that AOC's office had posted, and then hurriedly deleted. You remember this? Trump asked her, waving the papers. This is your FAQ. You deleted it because everyone started laughing at you. But the internet is forever. He put on a pair of reading glasses, a rare move that signaled he was about to get specific. Let's see what is in here, Trump said, flipping a page. Quote, we set a goal to get to net zero, rather than zero emissions, in 10 years, because we aren't sure that we'll be able to fully get rid of farting cows and airplanes that fast. The audience laughed. It started as a nervous chuckle and grew into a roar. Farting cows, Trump repeated, deadpan. She wants to ban cows. No more steaks, no more cheeseburgers, no more milk. Because they fart. He looked at AOC over the rim of his glasses. You want to tell the farmers in Iowa that? Trump asked. You want to tell the ranchers in Texas that their livelihood is illegal because you don't like biology? And airplanes, Trump continued. She wants to get rid of air travel. She wants to build a train across the ocean. Folks, I build things for a living. You cannot build a train to Hawaii. AOC was blushing furiously. Those were draft notes. They were released in error. The actual legislation focuses on renewable infrastructure and it focuses on control, Trump shouted, tossing the papers onto the floor. It focuses on telling Americans what they can drive, what they can eat, and where they can go. Trump walked to the edge of the stage. But the cows are funny, Trump said. What isn't funny is what you want to do to small businesses. She wants to retrofit every single building in the United States, Trump told the audience. Every home, every office, every factory, in 10 years. Do you know what that means? Trump asked. It means if you own a bakery with a gas oven, illegal, closed. If you own a trucking company with diesel trucks, illegal, bankrupt. If you own a dry cleaner with older machines, gone. Trump pointed to a man in the second row wearing a jacket with an HVAC company logo. Stand up, sir, Trump said. The man stood up. He looked rough, tired, and honest. What is your name? Tom, the man said. I run a heating and cooling business in Nassau County. Tom, Trump asked, if the Green New Deal passes and you have to retrofit every system you service to meet zero-emission standards in 10 years, what happens to your business? I'm out of business, Tom said bluntly. The equipment doesn't exist. The cost would be 10 times what my customers can pay. I'd have to fire my 12 guys and close the doors. Trump nodded. 12 guys. 12 families. You hear that, Alexandria? That is the sound of reality. You sit in your luxury apartment and dream up these fantasies about a green utopia. But Tom has to live in the real world. Your plan makes Tom a criminal, Trump said. Your plan destroys his life's work. More people stood up. A woman who owned a logistics company, a man who ran a family farm, a pizza shop owner who used coal-fired ovens. We can't do it, the pizza owner shouted. You would shut us down. My trucks would be illegal, the logistics woman yelled. I have 40 drivers. The chorus grew. It wasn't a political chant. It was a desperate plea from the engine room of the American economy. You are killing us. It is a fantasy. Trump let them scream. He let the anger wash over the stage. He let AOC see the faces of the people she called backward for opposing her vision. You see? Trump asked her, his voice cutting through the noise. This isn't about the environment. We all want clean air. We all want clean water. I have the cleanest water. This is about power. You want to break the American economy so you can rebuild it in your image, Trump declared. You want to take away their cars, their businesses, and their freedom, and replace it with a government check. But here is the problem, Alexandria, Trump said, leaning in. You can't pay for it. You could tax every billionaire in America at 100%, Trump said. You could take every dime from every corporation. You could confiscate every dollar in every bank account. And you wouldn't even have enough to pay for the first year. It is a lie, Trump said. It is a Ponzi scheme. It is a fraud. You are selling them a dream, Trump said, pointing to the audience. But Tom knows the truth. It is a nightmare. AOC sat frozen. Her theoretical arguments about modern monetary theory and existential risk died in her throat. You cannot debate a spreadsheet with a slogan. You cannot debate a bankrupt business owner with a tweet. That is round 5, Trump said, turning his back on her. The Green New Deal isn't a plan. It is a suicide pact. And we aren't signing it. The debate didn't end with a closing statement. It ended with a surrender. Donald Trump stood alone at center stage, the 5 folders of evidence stacked on his podium like bricks in a wall. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sat in her chair, diminished, silent, and utterly defeated. The audience was no longer divided. The sheer weight of the receipts, the dress, the car, the lost jobs, the grandmother, the $93 trillion price tag, had crushed the resistance. Trump looked at the camera, his expression serious. "We have had 5 rounds, Trump said. 5 rounds of truth." "We saw the Met Gala," Trump summarized, ticking them off. "The socialist socialite partying with the rich while her donors struggle." "We saw the Tesla," he continued, "the luxury lifestyle funded by the very capitalism she wants to destroy." "We saw the Amazon jobs," Trump said, pointing to the section of the audience where the unemployed workers sat. 25,000 dreams killed for clout. "We saw the grandmother," Trump said, shaking his head, "using her own family's pain to raise money that vanished." "And we saw the Green New Deal," Trump finished. "The fantasy that would bankrupt America and destroy small businesses like Tom's." He paused, looking at AOC. "Alexandria," Trump said, not unkindly, "you have a lot of followers. You are very famous. But fame isn't leadership, and likes aren't votes." "You forgot who you work for," Trump said. "You work for Queens. You work for the Bronx. You work for Maria. You work for Mike. You work for Tom." "But you stopped working for them a long time ago," Trump said. "You started working for AOC." "And tonight," Trump declared, "Queens is firing you." The audience erupted. It was a roar of catharsis. The chant started in the back, low and rhythmic, and built until it shook the cameras. "Trump! Trump! Trump!" Then it changed. The union workers changed it. The small business owners changed it. "Reality wins! Reality wins!" AOC stood up. She didn't shake hands. She didn't wave. She grabbed her notes, turned her back on the audience, and walked off the stage. Her exit was hasty, almost a run. Her staff met her in the wings, surrounding her like a protective detail extracting a VIP from a hostile zone. Trump stayed. He shook hands. He hugged Maria. He took a selfie with Mike, the IT guy. He looked like a man who had just cleared a construction site of debris and was ready to break ground. "Thank you, everybody," Trump shouted over the noise. "We are going to bring the jobs back. We are going to save the country. And we are never going to let the socialists win." The feed cut to black, but the story was just exploding. By the time AOC's motorcade hit the West Side Highway, her political career was burning. She opened her phone in the back of the SUV. Twitter, trending #1 worldwide, Czech socialist socialite. TikTok, 50 million views on the "Where are the jobs?" clip. Instagram, her comments section was a flood of flag emojis and "Where is the money, Alexandria?" She tried to type a defense, a thread explaining the nuance of the Amazon deal, but her hands were shaking too hard. She deleted the draft. Then, she did the unthinkable. She deleted the app. For the first time in her career, AOC went dark. The next morning, the fallout was nuclear. Her approval rating in Queens, which had been softening for months, collapsed. It dropped to 33%. Her staff began to jump ship. Her chief of staff resigned to pursue other opportunities. Her communications director quit. The rats were fleeing the sinking ship of the squad. But the final nail in the coffin came 3 days later. A press conference was held in Queens, outside the empty lot where Amazon would have been. A man stood at a podium made of crates. He was wearing a union jacket and work boots. "My name is Mike," he said. "I am an electrician. I was born in Queens. I live in Queens. And I drive a Ford, not a Tesla." I watched the debate, Mike said, and I realized something. We don't have a representative. We have a celebrity. So, I am announcing my candidacy for Congress, Mike declared. I am running against AOC, and I am running on a simple platform: reality. The crowd cheered. It was the same crowd from the studio. The Amazon workers, the small business owners, the Marias. Fundraising poured in. Not from Hollywood, not from Silicon Valley, from Queens. $5, $10, $20 donations from people who wanted their district back. The Queens versus Queens war was over. The bartender had lost the bar. 6 months later, on primary night, the result wasn't even close. AOC lost by 32 points. It was the biggest upset in New York political history. As the results flashed on the screen, Donald Trump sat in his office, watching the coverage. He smiled, picked up his phone, and sent one final truth. Queens taught the bartender a lesson tonight. You cannot preach socialism while living like a queen. Facts beat feelings. Reality wins. Class dismissed. The socialist socialite was gone. The experiment was over. And in Queens, the lights of the small businesses were staying on, burning bright into the night. The debate at CBS Studio 57 didn't just end a news cycle, it ignited a revolution in Queens. The fallout was immediate, nuclear, and irreversible. While Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez retreated into a digital bunker, deleting apps and silencing notifications, the ground in her district was shifting beneath her feet. The vacuum of leadership she left behind, the silence where there used to be tweets, was instantly filled by the people she had ignored. 3 days after the broadcast, a press conference was held in Astoria. It wasn't at a fancy venue. It wasn't catered by Whole Foods. It was held on the cracked pavement of the empty lot where Amazon HQ2 was supposed to stand, a scar on the neighborhood that Trump had ripped open for the world to see. Standing behind a podium made of stacked shipping crates was Mike. Mike was the IT worker Trump had pulled from the audience. He was wearing the same gray suit, now slightly wrinkled, but he stood with the posture of a man who had nothing left to lose. Flanking him were Tom, the HVAC business owner, and Maria, the grandmother who had been swindled out of $50. "My name is Mike," he said into the microphone, his voice echoing off the empty buildings. "I am not a politician. I am an electrician's son. I work in IT. I was born in Queens. I live in Queens. And I drive a Ford, not a Tesla." The crowd, a mix of local residents and national press who smelled blood, cheered. "I watched the debate," Mike continued, "and like millions of you, I realized something painful. We don't have a representative in Congress. We have a celebrity. We have an influencer who uses our zip code as a backdrop for her brand." "So," Mike declared, looking directly into the cameras, "I am announcing my candidacy for the United States Congress. I am running against AOC, and I am running on a simple platform: reality." The announcement hit the political world like a thunderclap. Usually, primary challengers against celebrities like AOC are ignored. But Mike wasn't just a challenger. He was the living embodiment of her failure. He was the Amazon guy. His campaign exploded overnight, but it wasn't funded by Hollywood galas or Silicon Valley bundlers. It was funded by the Marias. Small donations, $5, $10, $20, poured in from every corner of the district. In the first 48 hours, Mike raised $3 million. His first ad was devastatingly simple. It was a split screen. On the left, AOC at the Met Gala, flashing cameras, the tax the rich dress. On the right, the empty Amazon lot, with wind blowing trash across the pavement. The text on the screen read, "She got the party. You got the bill." AOC tried to respond. She emerged from her silence a week later to hold a town hall. But the dynamic had changed. The awe was gone. The fear of being called anti-progressive was gone. When she tried to speak about environmental racism, a man in the back stood up. "Where is the $100,000, Alexandria?" she stuttered. "We are addressing systemic issues of—" "Show us the receipts," a woman shouted from the front row. "Where are the jobs?" the union workers chanted from the balcony. She was booed off her own stage. The video of AOC fleeing her constituents, surrounded by security, garnered another 20 million views. It was the visual bookend to the Trump debate, the Queen fleeing her kingdom. Meanwhile, the squad was disintegrating. Political survival is a selfish instinct. Ilhan Omar, watching the polling numbers crater, released a statement emphasizing her focus on Minnesota issues. Rashida Tlaib went silent. Ayanna Pressley suddenly had scheduling conflicts whenever a joint appearance was suggested. They saw the toxicity. They saw the socialist socialite label sticking like tar. And they did what politicians always do. They cut the anchor to save the ship. AOC was alone. Election day arrived on a humid Tuesday in June. The turnout was unprecedented. It wasn't just the activists voting this time. It was the workers. It was the mechanics, the drivers, the grandmothers, the small business owners who felt they had finally been given permission to be angry. At Mike's headquarters, a rented union hall, the mood was electric. At AOC's headquarters, the mood was funeral. When the first returns came in, it wasn't a race. It was an eviction. Precinct 1, Astoria. Mike 72%, AOC 28%. Precinct 4, Sunnyside. Mike 68%, AOC 32%. Precinct 9, the Bronx. Mike 65%, AOC 35%. The margins were staggering. AOC didn't just lose the moderates, she lost the base. She lost the very working-class voters she claimed to own. At 9:00 p.m., the Associated Press called the race. Breaking: Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez defeated in shocking primary upset. The Chiron flashed across every screen in America. The invincible influencer, the face of the future, the inevitable president, had been fired by a guy named Mike. AOC didn't give a concession speech. She issued a written statement blaming corporate dark money and misinformation. She refused to come out and face the cameras. She refused to congratulate her opponent. It was the final confirmation of everything Trump had said. She couldn't handle reality. Mike took the stage in his union hall, flanked by Maria and Tom. He didn't have prepared remarks. He just leaned into the mic and smiled. "Queens is back," he said, "and we are open for business." The defeat of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was more than a lost election. It was the end of an era. It marked the moment the fever broke. Donald Trump sat in his office at Trump Tower, watching the coverage. The cable news networks were somber, treating the loss like a national tragedy. CNN ran a segment titled, "What Went Wrong?" MSNBC discussed the tragic loss of a progressive voice. Trump picked up his phone. He didn't need a teleprompter. He didn't need a script writer. He knew exactly what the American people were feeling. He hit record. "We did it," Trump said to the camera, his face serious but satisfied. "Queens taught the bartender a lesson tonight, and it is a lesson for the whole country. You cannot preach socialism while living like a queen. You cannot attack the rich while becoming the rich. You cannot destroy jobs and expect people to thank you." Tonight, Trump said, reality beat fantasy, facts beat feelings, and the receipts beat the rhetoric. Class dismissed. He posted the video. It became the most shared post in the history of Truth Social. The cultural shift was palpable. The term socialist socialite entered the permanent lexicon. It became a shorthand for any politician who lectured the working class from a position of luxury. When Bernie Sanders tried to tweet about millionaires and billionaires a week later, the top reply was a photo of his 3 houses with the caption, "Which one are you tweeting from, Bernie?" When Elizabeth Warren lectured about corporate greed, she was flooded with questions about her university salary. The shield of moral superiority that had protected the progressive elite was shattered. The public was no longer accepting the lecture. They were demanding the audit. AOC's post-congressional career was a study in irrelevance. The book deal she expected? Cancelled. Publishers looked at the sales numbers for political memoirs of failed one-term representatives and passed. The Netflix documentary? Shelved indefinitely. Creative differences, they said, but the truth was that nobody wanted to watch a movie about a loser. She tried to launch a podcast. It debuted at 42 and dropped off the charts in a month. Without the power of her office, without the fear she used to inspire, she was just another voice on the internet complaining about capitalism from a luxury apartment. Maria, the grandmother from the debate, had a different trajectory. Conservative organizations raised enough money to pay off her mortgage. She became a local hero in Queens, a symbol of standing up to power. She passed away peacefully 3 years later, in her own home, leaving a legacy of courage and a fully funded college trust for her granddaughter. The Amazon lot didn't stay empty. Congressman Mike worked with the city and new investors. It wasn't Amazon, but a coalition of tech and manufacturing companies broke ground on a new industrial park 18 months later. It created 15,000 jobs, not 25,000, but 15,000 real, paying jobs. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Donald Trump stood next to Mike. He held a golden pair of scissors. "We are building," Trump said to the crowd of workers. "We aren't tweeting. We are building." He looked at the steel beams rising into the sky. "This is what happens when you choose reality," Trump said. The narrative of the socialist socialite became a cautionary tale taught in political science classes and business schools. It was the ultimate case study in the danger of disconnecting from your customer base. AOC had forgotten the golden rule of politics. You work for the people, not the other way around. As the sun set over the new construction site in Queens, casting long shadows over the East River, the memory of the Green New Deal and the Met Gala dress faded into the past, replaced by the sounds of riveting guns and the engines of trucks. The fantasy was over. The work had begun. And somewhere in Florida, Donald Trump closed the file labeled AOC, knowing that he hadn't just won a debate. He had won the argument for a generation. The end.